Okay. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. This is a call that, one second, I'm sorry. One second, I'm terribly sorry. I just want to make sure I have the ability to see the questions. Okay. This is a call that we've been wanting to have for a while. We want to continue to have, where we talk about how to get the best use out of the system. The impetus was actually, it shouldn't have come to this, but a client had, as I said in an email, a longtime client had come to me and said, I'm not sure that the data is representing what it should be. And we talked about new features that we added to the system to allow it to do that. Our system has a lot of settings in it, and we do that so we can accommodate different use cases, and we do that so you can see different information. What that means, though, is some of these features may not have been available when you were onboarded, but that we want to make sure that if we have adapted them to your business, so you can incorporate them into what you are seeing. We want the system to be accurate. When we think about what our product provides, it's not simply a regurgitation of data that's in ConnectWise. Obviously, we pull our data from ConnectWise at this point, but further that it's an understanding of what that data is supposed to mean, and it allows us to adapt that data to what really is going on in your business. So the settings are critically important. We focus on this on a can everybody hear me, by the way? Just raise your hand if you cannot. I just got a note that somebody can't hear. Raising hand is not necessarily the right way. If you can hear me, please say something. We have a hand raised, so people can hear me. Very good. So I'm going to continue. People can hear. So to that point, let's talk about some of the settings that we have. We can adapt to everybody's situation. There are limitations, but this is what we do focus on. And we're going to go through several of them. The first one I want to focus on is the list of what we're going to look at today. And we're not going to get through all of them in the detail that we need, and we can absolutely consider this to be the beginning of a conversation if we want to talk about how these will apply to your particular situation. But let's take a look at it. We're going to look at what admin cost factor means. We're going to look at fixed fee projects where the cost is going to go significantly beyond what you're going to invoice, and you want to avoid large reversals. We'll talk about if you've implemented Streamline IT. Streamline IT is the branded version of ConnectWise if you distribute ConnectWise to your clients and you're the CIO for their engineers. We're going to talk about how to identify low effective rate clients. This is less of a setting, just something we want to make sure people understand. Talk a little about internal technical, what that means, and how we capture it. And look at agreement additions, make sure you're reviewing them, and also the departments for your resources. And finally, we're going to cover some known data issues. We try very hard to make this represent what's going on in your business, so we'll let you know when we can't. We don't always get the data that we need, nor do we get it in a timely manner. So with that, I'd like to jump in. And I will do that right away. So the first one is this concept of admin cost factor. This is something that we brought to the system based on a request from a client. If you think about the engineer, we establish that they're $4,800 a month. They work 160 hours, and they're $30 an hour. That's pretty straightforward. If they do 120 hours working for the client, that's $3,600. If they do 40 hours working, for yourself doing admin time, that's another $30 an hour. And that gives you your $4,800. The problem is, and this is that some of our clients were looking at it, is that when you hire a new engineer, you're really hiring them for the 120 hours that they can service your clients. You're not really hiring them for the additional 40 hours they can attend meetings. So when we think about it, the $4,800 in this example, how do we apply that only to client time? And what we've done is we've developed something called the admin cost factor. And the admin cost factor, we zero out the admin costs, and we apply all of that cost to the client time. So for this example, we would say that the admin hours are $0 an hour. There's no cost associated with that. When you service the client, that really costs you $40 an hour. You're really allocating the time only over the client time. Right now, and this is something that we hope to have by the end of the week or beginning of next week, this doesn't include lost time. It also works best when you're working with salaried individuals versus hourly. But it is a way to make sure that if you want to know what it costs to service the client, well, if you hired that engineer for $4,800, you should apply that $4,800 to the time you spent servicing clients. If you want to implement this in the system, you go to Lookup, Options, Time Logs. There's a couple layers to this. Admin Cost Factor, and then click Yes. You then tag each member under the members to look up members, and you change it from is engineer, you change it to yes. Because you don't want to do this for your managers. Because if your manager works 80 hours on client and 80 hours on admin, that really is admin time. They really are managing other people. And that we differentiate that between managing other people and perhaps going to staff meetings as an attendee. You're hiring the manager to manage. You're not hiring the engineer to go to staff meetings. So that's the first thing, the admin cost factor. Okay, we'll move on to the next one. And these are the kind of things we want to talk about. This is something that I don't think ConnectWise can provide for you. And this is where we try to differentiate MSPCFO as an information provider, because the way we analyze the data, we want to make sure it's most relevant for you. Okay, our next thing we're going to look at is fixed fee projects. So as many of you know, the way that we do a fixed fee project is we look at the value of the work that's done. You know, if this is let's say this is a $200 an hour person, they work 5 hours in month one, that's $1,000 of work. Then they work 15 hours, that's $3,000 of work. In total, they do, what does the math work out on this? $9,000 worth of work. But you've only invoiced the client $5,000. This could happen for any number of reasons. The project could go off the rails. You could decide this project you're going to basically sell at a discount. It could be an onboarding project where you're happy to sell the project at a loss because it gives you the opportunity to get the client as a long-term contract. But the problem is when we post the revenue, we're posting it at the standard is a 25% discount. So in month one, it's $750 of the $1,000 worth of work. It's $3,000, $2,250 of the $3,000 worth of work. And in month three, we now have $3,000 worth of revenue we've posted. That's already more than the that's already $6,000 we've posted for a project you'll only collect $5,000 for. So when we close out the project, we have to have a $1,000 reversal. That's fine, but many people don't want to see that. They don't want to see you accruing revenue that you know is going to be in excess of the value of the project. So what you can do is you can establish a cap. The cap set, well, there's two things you can do. One, you can say you're going to post a discount of greater than 25%, so that in any given month, instead of posting 750, you might post 500 if you put a 50% discount. And you can do this on the project level. Additionally, you can put in what we call the cap. The cap is great for fixed fee projects because you pretty much know how much it's going to be when you start it. If there's something out of scope, well, that's going to be something different from the project. So what you can do is you can say with a $5,000 cap on this project, you're going to stop accruing revenue once you hit that $5,000 mark. And that prevents you from having the reversal. This obviously is also allocated across engineers, so that in total we're not accruing more than $5,000. But when we close out the project, we will, in a net zero way, reallocate all the revenue so that each engineer gets the appropriate amount. This has come up with a few of our clients who have wanted to see, not have the large reversals and not wanted to see, this could be an 8, 9, 10-month project, and you could start accruing massive amounts of revenue that really don't exist. The way you would adjust this is in Lookup, Projects, and you would edit it, and you can establish a cap for any individual project. Again, we think this is something that's pretty valuable. We think it's very important to post revenue as the work is being done, so you have a matching of revenue to expenses. But additionally, we think it's pretty valuable for you the ability to say, you know what, this isn't going to be a $10,000 project. Let's make sure the revenue, we never post revenue more than $5,000. You can also put $0 in if it's a onboarding project where there's zero revenue. There is something that we've scratched out on a piece of paper, but we haven't been able to implement yet, where we are going to try to have a project. Let's say that you sign on a client for $5,000 a month, and you think they're going to be with you for 3 years. What we can do is we can say there's a, let's call it a $6,000 project that you allocate over the life of the agreement, so that you can get credit for the project up front, and it's going to reduce the value of the agreement every month. I think it's a pretty interesting thing we can do. We just haven't been able to basically put it into the code based on other priorities. That's something else that we're going to have shortly. Okay, I'm going to take a quick pause after these first two items and see if anybody has any questions. If you have them, please feel free to ask. I don't see any questions yet, so we'll keep moving. Wait a minute. Are there questions? Hold on. This is WebEx being annoying. Give me 1 second. What are the questions? I'm sorry, I'm just trying to figure out WebEx. This is me. Okay, I'm sorry, look at some questions here first. There we go. The first question is the, let me resume my screen. First question we have is with regard to admin cost factor. Is it always 75% of work, 25% of admin? No, it's not. It's actually the ratio. What we do basically is we determine how many hours there are, zero out the value of the admin hours, and reallocate that amount. So we really reallocate $1,200 to the 120 hours. If this were 140 and 20, the math would absolutely be different. We look at the amount of admin time to the amount of client time. That's the first question. Is there a way to default project capping for all fixed fee projects? There is not. The issue is that we don't know what so the right answer would be, the right answer is that we need to know how much the project should be, but we don't know that. That information, we've looked for it, it's not really passed to us. So it's not automatic. You can certainly go into lookup projects to adjust what the cap should be on a project-by-project basis. Another question came up, do we advocate that project caps get used if a project is going to go over? I tend to think it's a good idea if you know it's going to go over, because it stops you from having revenue and getting a reversal. That's not really a good thing to have from a management perspective. We don't want to do that for you. It's something you should do on your own, with the knowledge that if you're already at $8,000 and your cap is at $5,000, it may change a prior month. So changing prior months is something we're always very hesitant to do because you may have paid somebody based on a prior month. So I would be cautious of doing that once it's already gone on. Let's see, more questions. We have a few here. Gosh, it's possible to reverse accrue the correction at the end of the fixed project provided after the month if the project's occurred for 700. Okay, so here's a longer question with regard to the capping of the projects. And that is it possible to reverse the accrual for the prior months? And to be honest, that's what we started doing when we first launched the program. I don't like doing it, I don't advocate it, and we stopped doing it. And let me tell you the reason why. And that is for what I just said, we don't like changing your historical numbers based on what goes on in the system. We don't want you to say, in November you were profitable, oh, whoops, we were just kidding, you weren't profitable. Obviously, if there's a reversal that's coming, that's going to have an impact, but we like to think you can close the book on prior months. So we don't really think that prorating prior months is a great idea. If you implement admin cost factor, does that skew individual client ERL, client effective rate? It doesn't. The question is whether it implements client effective rate. No, it does not. Effective rate is a revenue item, not a cost item, so it actually doesn't come into play at all. Effective rate is dollars earned divided by hours worked. Cost is not part of the equation at all. And then an excellent question, this comes into something we'll talk about later. How do you account for an out-of-scope project, out-of-scope T&M phase of a fixed fee project? This comes into known data issues. We cannot. This came up on a call this morning with another client. ConnectWise does not pass us phase-specific billing information. It only passes us project billing. So while different phases might have different billing, we don't know that. We only know what it is as a whole. I've talked to ConnectWise about it. It's a known data issue, and they are looking into it. So at this point, we have to bill a project as a whole. Okay, that exhausts our first round of questions. So I'm going to keep moving, and I hope that you're finding this useful. So the next thing I want to talk about, and this is less how to use the system rather than just what to find out what's in the system, is the whole concept of agreement clients. How do you find a good versus a bad client and why it's good versus bad? The answer really is we put that in our segments report. So this is the segments report, which I assume most of you are familiar with. You can see, the profitability per hour. We're ranking it by that right now. You can tell because there's one up arrow versus an up and a down. And you can see we rank them from the best to the worst, 1 being the worst, 5 being the best. And you can see that these are lower profitability per hour. And just to remind you, contribution per hour is a metric we really like because it looks at the overall profitability of the relationship, not just the agreement. There are a lot of people that focus on the agreement and then miss the fact that they have profitable clients. That's not a good thing because you, on occasion, could be throwing out the baby with the bathwater. We've talked to clients who've said, I have this horrible, horrible client, and when we looked at them, they were a horrible agreement, but they sold $40,000 of product every month. In that situation, it's a good client with a bad agreement, and you kind of want to keep a client like that. So that's why we like looking at this metric. So if we find the lower performing clients, so the lower contribution per hour, based on this ranking, this should be over one column, and then you have the effective rates, you could see whether it's because they have a bad agreement. And our underperforming clients in this situation make, $85 an hour. On average, they do about 118. And what we do is we break this down by nodes, workstation equivalents. Workstation is 1, a server is 2. This is based on your configuration count in ConnectWise. And what we want to do is we want to say, based on the machines you're managing, how many hours are you putting in and how much money are you generating? Because if you have a low effective rate client, the issue that you have is that either they're overutilizing you or underpaying you. It's dollars per hour. Either dollars are too low or hours are too high. And that's what we try to break down for you in this chart. So you can say, well, the segment 1 clients on average are really overutilizing you. They're about 40% higher in time than your average. They're 0.71 hours and it should be at 0.54. Versus segment 2 clients are underpaying you. And this is something that I think you can use when you go back to your clients, because the conversation you have about an overutilizer, how do we determine how to make this work? Based on what you have, how do we reduce the hours? Is there a project involved? How do we make that better? Is very different than saying, well, listen, you're a legacy client and you're not paying market rates. We have to improve that to keep this relationship. Or perhaps we've had clients who've identified that the machine counts have actually changed and they forgot to update the additions. Happens to everyone. This is actually one of our most sophisticated clients, I would argue. And they caught that. That was missed because they realized the dollars per know were too low. Then they realized, wait a minute, they're too low because we're not charging them the right amount. And that's what we want to point people to. Okay, so that's the next one. So at this, I'm going to now switch from the PowerPoint to showing you some stuff in the application. So we've looked at the admin cost factor, the capping the fixed fee, and the low effective rate clients. There's some other things we want to look at. The first one is streamline clients. Now, many of you, not all of you, but many of you have used, make use of Streamline IT. So let me share my screen again. And with Streamline IT, what you do is you give your clients a member license, a client license. You give them a license to use ConnectWise. But typically that license is a client license versus a regular license. If it is a client license, we will exclude that. If you mark it as such, we'll exclude any member with that license type from adding to your hours or costs. This is important because they're not your resources and you don't pay for them. One second, I'm sharing my screen. Here we go. So you can see it here under Lookup Member Licenses. And the nice thing about it is we don't exclude members, we exclude licenses. So once you exclude the client license, you can continue to add members, with that license type, and we will exclude them automatically. We had a client recently who wanted to know why their hours were so high, and they realized they were counting the hours of their clients' licenses. Not appropriate. Well, not appropriate is not necessarily the right word, but it was mistaken in what it was showing. So that's one thing I want to share with you. Another one. Okay, we'll go over one more section and then we'll stop first, then we'll come back to the questions. The next one I want to look at is your internal technical. So this is actually very important in understanding the allocation of engineer time. So for an engineer, any given engineer, you can see how many hours went in for fixed fee agreements. This is under the members table. Fixed fee tickets, projects, actual rate, supporting license agreements. This is, if you have an agreement and somebody puts time against, say, supporting an antivirus or Office 365 agreement, you'd have time in here. Admin time, that's just going to meetings. Sales, internal technical, what has yet to be invoiced, and time that is not billable. Now, it's important because some of these have revenue associated with it, and it's really labor revenue. Your license and support, when you sell Office 365, you're not selling labor, typically, so there's no revenue associated with here. There's no revenue associated with admin or sales. The problem is internal technical, we can allow you to assign revenue to. We look at the billable hours and say, well, the person will get a certain amount of credit if they're working on your servers, if they're working on updating doing some patchwork on your own RMM system, anything that's really working on technical stuff, so they're not disincentive. They actually get credit for doing the work. And where we get this is we go to our lookup tables and we look at the work types. So every time entry has a client name on it. It's either you or it's one of your clients. Under internal clients, we identify what's you versus another client. And then for each work type, we can say whether that work type is admin time or internal technical. I strongly encourage you to take a look at this for a couple of reasons. One, if you want to pay your engineers based on the value of the work, you want to say internal technical has more value than going to a meeting. And the second is from management perspective. You really want to know if somebody's spending time doing admin or doing technical work. I would argue you can make a very different decision based on resource allocation based on that information. So that's, again, in lookup work types For all internal clients, so that's when you are the client name on the time entry, you can decide which work types are internal technical versus admin. There was a question as to what is internal. Well, that's under lookup internal clients, and you would add a client to that list to say what is internal. Typically, we help you with that when there's one name. If there's been a merger, if you have subsidiaries, if you have sister companies, there might be more than one name. But that's where it is. It's under the which client is internal is under lookup internal, and then the work types. If it's that client, it decides which type of work type to look at. Okay, we're going to take another pause and look at some questions here. The first question is dollars per node should be I correct? And this is kind of a sticky question. So if we go back to our segments report and we look at the client, and then we look at our dollars per node. 1 second, it's coming up in a second. The question is, do you want this to be high? The answer is sort of, and I'll tell you the reason why, or the reason that it's explained to me. This is more of a management issue, and there are smarter people than me to give you the answer. But the feedback that I've gotten and the thing that we've discussed are, yes, you want to make more money per node. You want to probably make what you're supposed to make per node. If you're charging $100 per workstation, you want to make $100 per workstation. You don't want to make less. If you look at the machines you're managing, you want that to be right. If you're making $300 per workstation for any number of reasons, that's not a great thing because then that client might be a flight risk. You know, if you actually have user-based pricing, and we have to look at this based on nodes because we don't really have great user information. You always want to be careful with your clients who are too profitable. You know, I went through a list of this with a client recently, and we looked at their worst clients and we looked at their best. And they said, oh yeah, we have to work on some of those. And I said, well, don't forget about your best clients, the one who are paying you really well, because they're flight risks. And we went through the list and he says, oh, that one just gave us notice. So yes, having more money is better than having less money, but that should be done in the context of making sure the client sees themselves getting value. If they're paying you really well, maybe you give them an extra service. That's one that I want to answer. There's another question of building your own group of clients that we have in quintiles. So right now the quintiles really are just by client and by market. What you can do is you can create an aggregate. You can't really rank by aggregate, but under lookup aggregates, you can create an aggregate client. The example I like to use, a simplistic one, is Joe's Crab Shack West, Joe's Crab Shack East. It's really one relationship, and you can create a client based on that. So that's something that you can do. We don't really have custom segmenting at this point. We do have it by market. You can, I guess, back into it that way. Next question was the true amount of working hours per month. Very good question, and the answer is sort of. Under lookup, goodness gracious, lookup days per month, we have a standard amount in here. It generally defaults to around 21 days a month. We're going to actually change this shortly. So it's the number of non-weekend days. We have clients all over the world. I'm not going to get into the game of saying, well, you observe Patriots Day, you observe Independence Day, your Thanksgiving Day is different than our Thanksgiving Day. So we're going to change this so it's all non-weekend days a month. But the number of hours are based on, available hours are based on an 8-hour day based on this number of days per month. And this is under lookup days per month. Let's see what else do we have here. Suggestions on what to attribute to internal technical. That comes from, many things that we have kind of rebract to this. It comes from our conversations with C-level operations. They typically recommend 50 cents on the dollar, so a 50% discount. And you can assign that under lookup options, under time logs, internal technical revenue credit. This is at 0.5. You can make it 0.75, you can make it 1. How you do it is your decision as long as you're comfortable with it, but this is where you would change that number. And the last question I have for now is, where is the node count coming from in ConnectWise? It's coming from the configurations table. We look only at, so under configurations, in the configuration list, you decide what counts as a node. We generally just say it's managed workstations and managed servers. One would be 2 node equivalents, one would be 1. You can make that change as you see fit. What it really should be is how much revenue you're generating. If you're generating $75 per workstation and $150 per server, well, then it's 2 to 1. If it's the same for both and you put the same amount of time, then it should be 1 and 1. We like this number because on almost all of our clients, it's a good number. Obviously, some people have a little bit of garbage in there, but the reason it's a good number because this comes from your RMM. So you're paying per agent here. And if you're paying per agent, we trust that it's a good count. If anybody has a question, we can set up time and I can give you the node counts. We've gone through this with a couple of clients. There are issues on occasion if you switch RMMs and there's not a purge. You'll have both the old managed stations and the new, and it'll be a double counting because the old one will still stay on there in ConnectWise, and the new one will come on as well. We can go through that with you if you want. We could set up time. Okay. So with that, I'm going to keep moving. Next one's a big one, and that's our agreement edition review. And we really encourage everyone to take a look at this on a regular basis because it really is so important. It's important for a couple of reasons. One is to make sure you have a costs in there in ConnectWise, so you properly understand how much your profitability is. Your revenue from ConnectWise generally feeds into your accounting system. We trust that that's an accurate number. You pay taxes on it. If it were wrong, you would go to jail. Your costs don't feed anywhere except reporting. You put your invoices in your accounting system. They don't flow through ConnectWise. So if you didn't have the data there, there's not really a strong amount of recourse. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that your costs are correct. From this page, you can see for every agreement, and this is month by month because your units, if you sold 1,000 units of backup one month and then it was 1,100 units the following month, we want to know what you invoiced any given month. So we look at it by month. And you can see both, if there's no product in here, what's the agreement amount and all of the products beneath it. And we want to make sure these numbers are right. We work with all of our new clients to share this with them so that they can, so we share this with them so that we can make the assignments on their own. If you want to look at this on a whole, you simply export this to Excel, and you can actually rank it by SKU to see all of your antiviruses lining up and make sure that they're all the same. All of your BDR devices, well, the BDR devices might be different sizes, but all of your managed workstations having the same cost. Strongly encourage everyone to go through this. If you want us to go through it with you, it's probably a 15-20 minute call. We'd be happy to have it with you to make sure it's set up properly. We recently added in information to allow us to override some of your costs at the agreement level. We could always do it at the item level if we weren't comfortable with the number, but now we can do it at the agreement level as well to account for less included items. Less included falls into the category of a known issue that we don't get from ConnectWise. One question, a question that comes up right now. The FFA components, it only shows parents. How can we see all the child? The children are in here. What's not in here is agreements that we've identified as product agreements. When you set up your agreements, you identify them as either product, license and subscription, or you identify them as monthly recurring, FFA. If it's a license and subscription, we don't need to see it because we know it's 100% product. We can also work with you on that list to make sure it's correct. But your child agreements, if they're labor, should be in there as well. Okay, so there's some questions that came in otherwise. That one. Okay, there's a question back to the internal time. And that is, how does it know how much the time is worth? There's two things we can do. The first is there is a billable rate associated with work role and work type. And that's how we don't calculate that. It comes directly from ConnectWise. If it's internal technical, it's still there. It's just there's no one to bill it to. We take that amount and see what the value of the time is. If it's $160 an hour and it's a half an hour, that's half an hour billable time for internal technical. And that's $80 of value. If there's nothing in there, if it's billable but there's no rate, we actually can, under options, have a default hourly rate where the number is 0 but shouldn't be. You can set that here. It obviously can't be as granular as you have it in ConnectWise, but it does give you something to fill where there's a gap. Oh, somebody asked a question why you don't see all the reports that I have. We have some stuff that we've been testing, and you're looking at my screen, which I can see everything. You can't see everything right now because we haven't released these reports because we don't think they're representative of what we want to share. So there's some things that I have on mine that you can't see on yours. It's not that we're withholding them, it's that we built them and decided to kill them, but I still kind of keep them around for old time's sake. Okay, I think I'm caught up on questions. So we'll go on to the next one. Last one we want to talk about here is departments for your resources. So if you look at your billing by month, you can, this one doesn't have it set up, but you can sort that by department, by technical, by sales, by project work. So you can see on various of your member reports that filtered by department. So you would think the nice thing to do would be we go into ConnectWise and we see what department each of your engineers have, except that ConnectWise doesn't really capture it that way. So what we've done is we've realized that for every one of your members, you actually have a contact set up. And in that contact field, as if they were a contact at a client company, there is a department name. And we can map the department name from there back to the member. We do this by unique email address. So if you have, Fred@company.com, if Fred@company.com is also a member, we will map that over and we can know what department it is. If you have Fred@company.com and then otherwise it's Frederick, that would not map. They need to have the same unique email address. Once you have that, let us know and we'll refeed your members and it'll come across and then you can do sorting and you can do filtering by department. Okay, that's a lot of the stuff I wanted to go over. I'm going to start talking quickly now about known data issues, and then I want to ask everyone for a favor at the end of this call. So known data issues, there's a few of them. The one that's, to me, the most annoying, and all of these are annoying, is that ConnectWise doesn't always tell us when a record is updated, and it certainly doesn't tell us when a record is deleted. So I'll give you an example. If you enter a time entry on March 15th, and then on April 20th, you create an invoice for that time record. It's a little late, but we'll cut you some slack. What should happen to that original time record is it would then be attached to the invoice. And it actually is. That there's a field on the time record to say what invoice it's on. And if this is T&M, that field is then filled with this invoice created on April 20th. When we do our update feeds, we should say that, oh, this March 15th time entry has now been updated. Excuse me, and then we'll feed it in and we'll have this new information. It will no longer be uninvoiced time. It will now be time on an invoice. It'll be revenue. The problem is ConnectWise doesn't tell us when they update that field. There's actually a field in the time records called updated at. And when we do our feeds, we look for everything that's been updated in the last day. Even though we do it 4 times a day, we still look for the last 24 hours before we started our previous feed. Because they don't update that record, even though on April 20th it is now part of an invoice, we don't know it was updated. This is a known issue. We've taken it to ConnectWise. They call it a UI issue. I call it a bug. Tomato, tomato. And what we've done is we've built a workaround where every Saturday we do a 90-day look back. And in that 90-day look back, we would pick it up. For many of our clients, the challenge is if you pay your engineers based on productivity on the 3rd of the month, and the 3rd is a Thursday, and you've gotten all your invoices out, we would not see that time. That would continue to show as uninvoiced because we wouldn't do our look back until Saturday. So we can't do it on every feed. It would take too much time and it would slow everything down. We need to do it once a week. Optimally, it'd be nice if ConnectWise told us when they updated the record, but we have to work with what we have. So if this is a situation for you, and we do have a couple of clients who reach out to us on the 1st or 2nd of every month, and they say, listen, my uninvoiced, it looks a little high, I've sent out my invoices, can you please run an update feed? We would be happy to do it. I'd be even happier if ConnectWise fixed their data, but we want you guys to have good numbers, and you shouldn't have to wait till Friday if your business process means you have to have your data in by Thursday. So give us a heads up. It takes probably an hour to run an update feed. For everybody, we can't do it every time, but for individual clients, we can do it. So that would pick up when the that would pick up when the time record when an invoice is added. The other thing that isn't always changed, it doesn't change the updated at when the billing status changes. When it goes from draft to sent, that doesn't flag it that the item has been updated. It's not part of our update feed. So that again also has to show up in the 90-day look back. We're happy to do that on demand. Just send us a note and we'll run it quickly. The phases is another item that we have an issue with. We've built into the system the ability to do phase-specific billing. This phase is fixed, this phase is variable, or actual rates. But ConnectWise doesn't pass us the information as to which phase is which. I've talked to them about it, and we're working to fix it. The last item is deleted records. It doesn't tell us when a record is deleted. So if we have a record that's in the system, if you create an invoice, you delete it, create it on Monday, it's part of our feed, it's in the system, you then delete it and create a new invoice on Wednesday, well, we don't know that that old invoice was deleted because there's no updated at, there's nothing at all to say that anything's changed. So this is something we've been working on, we've been struggling with this for probably 9 months, is we created our own destroyer process. And in the destroyer, the brute force of it is we count records, and if we say that you should have 1,000 records in the system and you really have 995, we'll go through and see where the missing records is and destroy those records. I think ConnectWise changed an index, so every time we try to roll this out, we do our count and it seems okay, and then a couple days later they change something, and we end up destroying all your records. It's not such a big deal, we just need to refeed everything, it doesn't change the settings, but it's something that we continue to struggle with. So those are really our large known issues. Now, let me go back to a question here. How does a program handle when a member works for multiple departments? The short of it is we don't. Our department designation is based on what department a member has on their contact field. You cannot put multiple departments there, you can only put in one, and that's what we use. That's all I see for questions at the moment. So the last thing I want to talk about, and this is something I had a conversation this morning with someone, we've been anxious to kick this off and we hope to have it ready within the next month, is what we like to think of as MSP 3.0. In case you're wondering, 1.0 was when we kind of forced this through in Excel, 2.0 is when we added application, and 3.0 is going to be a very, hopefully a different look and feel. All the reports that we have right now will be there, but we want to put a layer on top of it that provides discrete questions and answers for you. Questions like Rex brought up on a previous call, when do I need to hire or fire an engineer? Questions like, which projects are outliers in terms of my profitability? Which agreements are underpriced versus overperforming? All the information is here, but we want to bring this up to the front in a dashboard so that you can see it directly. For that, I was going to ask for volunteers, and everybody is more than welcome to volunteer, but instead I'm going to try and reach out to some people who I see as active users in the system and have asked questions that show to me that they're using the system in a way that I think others would enjoy it or get value from. If you can tell us how you're using the system, our consultant is going to interview you. It's a front-end design consultant, and she's going to talk to you about what questions you want to have answered, what information you get, and we're going to think about how we can visualize that as a widget on the dashboard. We've asked you all for years now for new widgets, but now we're going to take initiative and really just kind of say, what can we do to make the information much more consumable for you? We want this to be a valuable product. We want this not just from a business standpoint that, if you don't find value, you won't stay with us, but also from a practical standpoint. How do we get up in bed in the morning? We with pride consider that we help companies, and I think the more easily we make the information digestible, the better we'll be at doing that. On top of that, we're building in some health checks so that some of the stuff that we do in the background, we can bring to the fore. Some of our items up here, we're going to get rid of and put that all in one global health check. So you can see, where do I have client issues? Where do I have payment, salary issues? Where do I have work type issues? Do I have agreement issues? All those things we want to help you to, again, get that as quickly as possible, identify issues, kind of issues like we're talking about now, but bring that up to your force so you don't have to, we don't have to look into the system and say, oh, it looks like you've done something and it wasn't caught, or you realize that something changed and you hadn't spoken to us and maybe your data isn't perfect. So we're going to implement a health check so you can see in real time or, on a daily basis if something's changed that would affect your data, and you can accept it, say that's totally legitimate, or say, no, you know what, that's not right, then we go back and take a look at it. Well, that's most of what I wanted to talk about. I'll leave it open in case anybody has any more questions. If there's some things you want to dive deeper into, by all means, please set up a call. I'll be happy to have a conversation. And again, the whole point of this is for everyone to get as much value as possible. Oh, goodness gracious. Here's a long question. Give me 1 second to read it. MSPCFO doesn't actually have the hours. I need to apologize. No, yeah, correct. The admin cost factor would absolutely change. It does not affect effective rate. The question was, does it affect contribution per hour? And it certainly does. We have different metrics. Contribution per hour is a profitability metric. Effective rate is a revenue metric. So if we change the cost, it doesn't really touch revenue metrics, but it would affect profitability metrics. Listen, I hope everybody found this relevant and found this valuable. We are going to reach out and ask you for some time to help us make the product even better. I do hope that you're able to share that time with us. If you have any questions, please do reach out to us. We have client service people, customer success, whatever the zeitgeist has us calling these people these days, analysts who are happy to spend some time working with you. We want you all happy. We want you all using the product. We want you all getting value. We have clients who have told us they get a 15 times ROI. And I sat down with them and we actually identified that. We want everyone to get that kind of ROI. If you're spending the money on our product, if it's just to have information you're not going to use, let's help you get to a point where you can use it. Let's help you get to a point where this is the best investment that you make after buying a dog. And that's all we have for today. Thank you all very much. And I look forward to chatting with all of you in the future. Bye-bye.